and welcome. I'm Suma Katauka and you're watching the World Report on NewsX. Well, let's take a look at some of the headlines of this hour. A UK High Court judge has ruled that key witness Gavin Burrows can testify by video in the privacy lawsuit brought by Prince Harry and Elton John against Associated Newspapers, publisher of the Daily Mail, over alleged phone hacking and unlawful information gathering spanning 30 years. The case now is in its 29th day and it continues on. Bill and Hillary Clinton are set to testify before the House Oversight Committee in its Jeffrey Epstein investigation. The depositions will take place in Chappaqua, New York. World Economic Forum chief Borge Brende steps down amid an investigation into his ties to Jeffrey Epstein. US records show he met Epstein 3 times and exchanged messages. Israeli military vehicles enter Syria's Quneitra province in the Golan Heights. Local media report Syrian state TV says a 30-vehicle convoy carried out a search near Ain Ziwan. Nearly 8,000 migrants died or went missing last year, the UN says, warning the real figure may be higher. The IOM blames tighter borders and fewer legal routes for driving people to smugglers. Cuban forces kill 4 and wound 6 after a Florida-registered boat opens fire in Cuban waters. Officials say the armed group from the U.S. included suspected anti-government plotters. UNICEF warns of heavy civilian casualties from Myanmar military airstrikes during the civil war. Local reports say attacks in Sagaing and Rakhine killed at least 24 people. ChatGPT maker OpenAI has announced that it would make London its largest research hub outside the United States, citing Britain's technology ecosystem as an ideal environment to invest in and develop new artificial intelligence systems. Now we start with Russia. Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova has said that only a madman could propose a permanent ban on oil imports from Russia as planned by the European Union. This comes as, according to reports, the European Commission will submit a legal proposal to permanently ban Russian oil imports on April 15, 3 days after Hungary's parliamentary election. Meanwhile, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov has stated after a meeting between Vladimir Putin and Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko that dangerous surroundings force Russia to be on guard. Let's in fact listen into the comments coming in from Russia.
Очевидно, что ставка в очередной раз делается на то, чтобы согласовать данный запрет квалифицированным большинством в обход позиции своих же собственных союзников, и я бы даже сказала, сочленов Будапешта и Братиславы, которые по-прежнему заинтересованы в импорте российской нефти, потому что, как и говорили руководители этих стран, ну, в частности, Виктор Орбан, так все и получается. То есть это те люди, это те лидеры, которые сохраняют экспертизу такого уровня, которая подтверждается временем.
Мягко говоря, недружественное окружение, недружественное проявление, это, конечно, обязывает нас и на уровне союзного государства постоянно быть начеку и принимать те меры для обеспечения безопасности, которые необходимы.
Now we welcome Mr. John Rosomondo. He's a president of Viking Research Associates and a geopolitical expert, joins us live from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much, Mr. Rosomondo, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, looking at Russia, why is Russia saying that, you know, to ban oil imports from Russia by European Union is not yes, it can create dangerous surroundings?
Well, let's put it this way. The Russians are all about psychological warfare and intimidation of other neighbors. And they're running scared because Russian oil imports sustained their war machine. And without European markets, it would deal a huge blow to the Russian economy and their ability to afford what they're doing. You still have exports to places like China and other locations, but I just see it as just a transparent effort to threaten Europe because the Russians know that they're losing economically.
And how do you see Slovakia and Poland's criticism towards Ukraine about letting them use the Druzhba pipeline?
Well, I think that the Poland and Slovakia are doing that is just sort of saying to the Ukrainians that they're helping the Russians economically by using that pipeline. So the number one thing that going back to the 1980s that President Reagan said was the Europeans allowing the Soviets then to build these pipelines was the way of allowing the Soviets to hold Europe hostage, and Russia has continued that.
How do you see the current alignment of EU towards Ukraine and towards Russia, both?
Well, I think that it's taken the Europeans too long to realize that they've made themselves dependent on Russia, and they're trying to go after the mother's milk, so to speak, of the Russian economy. And as far as Ukraine is concerned, they want to keep the Ukrainians in the fight to bleed as many Russians as they can. But I think at the end of the day, it's a lose-lose proposition with this war because no one's winning.
Last week, EU Chief Ursula von der Leyen announced that they are planning a winter package for the next winters. Do you think they're not hopeful about an end or the successful mediation effort by US on Ukraine-Russia war?
Well, let's put it this way. The distance between the U.S. Ukraine position and the Russian position is gigantic. I mean, the Russians want Ukraine to basically be a tamed semi-vassal that it can just choose to invade if it wants. And the West wants Ukraine to retain its sovereignty and regain the territory that the Russians conquered. So I don't see any way to resolve this war short of the Russians deciding themselves to end it.
And do you think that U.S. President Trump is still interested in brokering a peace between them? How is his alignment towards Russia and Ukraine now?
Well, of course, President Trump wants peace between the two. It would be part of his legacy. He campaigned for president the third time, saying that he would be the man to bring peace. And he underestimated the power of Russian ideology in this, as he underestimates the power of ideology everywhere else.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rossomando, for sharing that. Please do stay with us as we come back to you. Now, seeing US and Iran, the United States and Iran could reach a deal framework if Washington separates nuclear and non-nuclear issues, according to a senior Iranian official. The official has added that remaining gaps will be addressed during a third round of talks in Geneva. Negotiations have been intense and serious, with Tehran stressing the importance of recognizing its right to nuclear energy for peaceful purposes and the lifting of sanctions. Meanwhile, satellite imagery showed the U.S. Navy Nimitz-class aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln operating in the Arabian Sea as the United States deploys a vast naval force near the Iranian coast ahead of possible strikes on the Islamic Republic. Now we welcome back Mr. John Rossomando. He's joining us live from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much, Mr. Rossomando, for staying with us. Now, as Iranian Deputy minister has said that it would become, the remaining talks will be, will be successful if their points are perhaps agreed by or with US. How do you analyze that? Do you think that is even possible?
No, there's no way we're going to get a deal. The Iranians don't want to give up their ballistic missiles. They don't want to give up their proxies. They don't want to give up the intimidation power that they have. They're willing to say that they'll reduce their enrichment and focus on hospital level enrichment. But of course, that's a lie. The Iranians have never kept an agreement that they agreed to. They always hide the ball. They say they'll have IAEA inspections, but the problem is with Iran is it keeps secret sites where it continues the research, continues the enrichment, and that it can't be trusted.
So how do you analyze the current negotiations? Do you think the diplomacy is still on the table as negotiations continue? Do you think Trump is still patient to move on to fourth round and fifth round?
Well, let's put it this way. Trump wants to be seen by his base who are loyal to Tucker Carlson as a peacemaker. So he's going to keep on these fruitless negotiations that will accomplish absolutely nothing. This is all about political image and not about substance, because both sides are so far apart that there will never be a deal.
Right. Thank you for highlighting that, Mr. Rosamando. Great learning from you. Now we move on to Cuba. Cuba's President Miguel Diaz-Canel has declared that the Caribbean nation will defend itself firmly against any terrorist and mercenary aggression following a deadly shootout off of Cuba's coast. Cuban authorities say a Florida-registered speedboat entered Cuban waters and opened fire on a patrol, leading to Cuban forces killing 4 exiles and wounding 6 others in the confrontation. The incident comes amid heightened tensions with the United States, which has imposed sanctions and blocked oil shipments, aggravating Cuba's energy crisis and raised humanitarian concerns. Diaz-Canel has stressed that Cuba does not initiate aggression but will respond with determination to protect its sovereignty. Meanwhile, U.S. officials have said that they are investigating the incident independently with no confirmation of official U.S. involvement, as questions remain about what led to the violent encounter in Cuban territorial waters. Now we welcome Cuba's President Miguel Diaz-Canel has declared that the Caribbean nation will defend itself firmly against any terrorist and mercenary aggression following a deadly shootout off of Cuba's coast. Cuban authorities say a Florida-registered speedboat entered Cuban waters and opened fire on a patrol, leading to Cuban forces killing 4 exiles and wounding 6 others in the confrontation. This incident comes amid heightened tensions with the United States, which has imposed sanctions and blocked oil shipments, aggravating Cuba's energy crisis and raised humanitarian concerns. Diaz-Canel has stressed that Cuba does not initiate aggression, but will respond with determination to protect its sovereignty. Meanwhile, U.S. officials have said that they are investigating the incident independently, with no confirmation of official U.S. involvement, as questions remain about what led to the violent encounter in territorial waters. Cuba's president. We welcome Mr. Mark Sutherland. He's a geopolitical commentator, joins us live from London. Thank you very much, Mr. Sutherland, for joining us again. Good to see you.
Asuma, good to be with you.
Now, looking at this and also considering the history of U.S.-Cuba relations, how do you view the current situation in terms of escalating hostilities between two nations?
Well, as you refer to the historical history here, we can go back to the Cuban Missile Crisis of '62, and much beyond that, and including the fact that Cuba is a communist state. There are many people that have left the island of Cuba and then have sought refuge in America. And as I referred to before on your program, you have to look at people like Mark Rubio and his family that are of Cuban descent, like many. So people will be mindful of this. We also need to be mindful of how, the Cuban people are asked to just exist on very few dollars a week. There are food supply issues, electricity supply issues, many, and all of these issues have to be bore in mind into the standard of living, but also it's their ideology, and their ideology is communist. Even as in the past, Mr. President Obama has gone on there and has gone over there and enjoyed standing in front of grey buildings and enjoying all the razzmatazz of what Cuba could offer. But this is what it comes down to, Asuma. How relationships will unfold, they will always be thinking of Maduro and what happened there to you.
Yes, and in the context of this maritime clash and ongoing economic pressure on Cuba, do you believe that the island's government will shift its political stance or reforms in response to U.S. actions, or with Venezuela's situation that happened, or will these measures continue to reinforce more authoritarian approach?
I think it will mean, on a personal level, personal opinion, it mean they'll be digging in their heels, if you ask me. At the moment, that is what they will do. They will also be inspired. People might think, what a jump, by what they're seeing in Iran, because all these people do talk to each other. They have an ideology. We're working out and seeing the red-green axis come together. These countries then that are against the United States of America and what it stands for, or against the traditional Western world, even though those countries are beginning to question that and buckle under this ideology as well. That's why people have to stand up and push back. But I can actually see that they will be digging their heels in at this moment. Asuma.
Yes, and lastly, given that both countries have been through decades of tension, with Cuba framing U.S. actions as external aggression, is there any realistic avenue for reconciliation between U.S. and Cuba in the current geopolitical climate?
There could be reconciliation, but the ideology of communism, in my humble opinion, on the island of Cuba has to go. According to the president, I would say the way that the present administration in America under President Donald Trump and the administration actually views the world. They would like the Cuban people to be free, to then have a free market economy and not be restricted in the way that they are. That is all I can say in that regard. That will be at the center of, I believe, of a number of people that are in the administration, and that includes people like Marco Rubio.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sutherland, for highlighting that. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion. Now, moving the focus on to Middle East, during a press briefing, India's Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri has highlighted India's unique capabilities and capacities that could significantly aid in post-war Gaza recovery efforts. He acknowledged that while past initiatives had aimed to address the Palestinian question, the situation had become more complex, making peace efforts even more challenging. However, Mistry has emphasized that this is not the time to lose hope. He has assured that India has the necessary tools and expertise that would be highly relevant in assisting the ground situation in Gaza. Let's listen into some of the statements made by the Foreign Secretary of India.
Prime Ministers, the Prime Minister made his point stating India's firm belief in the value of dialogue and the value of pursuing peaceful solutions to all such issues, and also reiterated his readiness to offer India's support if there is any way in which India's support is required, to stand ready to offer that support towards a peaceful solution. India has expressed its firm support for the initiative. The Prime Minister said this in his address to the Knesset yesterday. And we firmly believe that it holds the promise of a just, durable and lasting peace for all the peoples of the region, including by addressing the Palestinian question.
Now we welcome back Mr. Mark Sutherland. He's a political commentator, joins us live from London. Thank you very much, Mr. Sutherland, for staying with us. Now, you know, as India's Foreign Secretary has highlighted India's unique capabilities and capacities, what do you think those are?
Well, as he has pointed out, and others have pointed out, and also, of course, remembering Mr. Modi's speech in the Knesset, and beforehand, Mr. Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech, and how Modi was actually welcomed. Lots of clapping and people listening intensely to what he had to say in regard to the relationship. You mentioned the word dialogue, and when they're saying the whole Palestinian issue, again, Asuma, you and I need about 6 hours just to sit down and go through the history.
Yes.
As much as this is profoundly unpopular in certain circles, the Gaza, you could argue, was the second attempt at a Palestinian state. You then say historically that there is a Palestinian state. It's called Jordan. But as much as this is profoundly uncomfortable, again, for people to hear, this is through history. That is what has been stated with since Israel then became a country again in 14th of May 1948, and then look at all the battles and all the attacks upon them, and they are still there. We could then go through the history of Yasser Arafat, and then creating Palestinianism as a political cause to push that. One of the problems that we are dealing with in all these discussions, we don't have time to discuss history, but one of the other problems is that people do not want to discuss history at all, and look at it from those viewpoints.
Yes.
Everyone, you know, as I say, the Israelis want peace. Everyone wants peace. It's how you then achieve that, and then looking at who started that, and Hamas started attack.
Sutherland.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes, Mr. Sutherland, I also wanted to ask, you know, do you think now that Mr. Modi, Prime Minister Modi is in Israel for 2 days, including today, do you think he has discussed Iran's situation with Israeli cabinet?
Yes, I think I would have thought that all of this is on the table, and particularly as with Iran, with the amount of ballistic missile capability they have, the fact that they were going for a nuclear bomb, and that they have been rearming ballistic missile wise. And then the accusation, the comments could be that they're also putting things in place in regard to get underway with the nuclear program again, to the best of their ability, considering the amount of people that have been taken out in that regard. But all of those discussions, I am sure, would be behind closed doors, having having that. Remember, as you've said, diplomatically, people seek to be roots of dialogue, and that is in the leader of India's case, Mr. Modi, that is definitely a position that I believe that he is taking. But there are within Israel, within the policies, and after the 7th of October 2023, there are red lines, and they will not be. I think they're being firmed up. Assume as we're on the edge, still remember, especially in Gaza, that Hamas have not completely disarmed. Also, when we're looking at Iran, we've got to bear in mind the fact that the Iranian regime has killed a minimum of from anywhere between 35,000 up to potentially 100,000 of their own citizens, just because they want freedom and they do not want to live under the theocracy that the Iranian regime has imposed since 1979. Asuma.
With that, I'd like to thank Mr. Sutherland for joining us today and sharing that insight. Thank you very much. Now we move on to our tech news. Instagram has announced it will notify parents if their teenager repeatedly searches for terms related to suicide or self-harm. This move comes as pressure mounts on governments to follow Australia's lead in banning social media for under 16-year-olds. The platform, owned by Meta, will start alerting parents who have signed up for Instagram's optional supervision setting. The alerts will begin next week in the United States, Britain, Australia, and Canada. This follows increasing government efforts to protect children online, particularly after concerns over AI chatbots creating non-consensual images. Instagram has a strict policy against content that promotes or glorifies suicide or self-harm. Parents will also be able to monitor their teen's account settings with their consent. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.